Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new segment on the channel in which I'll be taking some time away from the F1 Livery History series to offer some more editorial opinions on F1 liveries from the past. As you may have guessed, in this series I'll be looking at a particular F1 season and ranking each of the team liveries from the very worst to the very best. To kick things off, I'll be taking a look at the 1994 season. Whilst it was indeed an extremely tragic year in Formula 1, there was certainly a lot going on in the sport at the time. This was of course the season in which the FIA first made a conscious effort to clamp down on electronic driver assists, with systems that were legal in season 1993, such as active suspension, anti-lock brakes, traction control and launch control, all getting the black flag. This was also done as a cost-cutting measure. Observers of the time were beginning to compare Formula 1 with the Cold War space race, and the quote-unquote safety measures taken by the FIA for 1994 certainly generated an unpredictable season. It was a season in which a total of 46 drivers took to the grid, teams shuffling their driver lineups regularly, mostly out of financial necessity, but sadly on occasions teams would be required to find new drivers for far more significant reasons. A highly momentous season that would shape the sport for years to come. A season which featured an iconic battle between Schumacher and Hill that went down to the final race and provided a controversial ending to a highly controversial year. Schumacher's first world title, along with Senna's tragic death, Nigel Mansell's final win, and the last hurrah for the once mighty Team Lotus, signalled the arrival of a shift in the sport's direction, as the great teams and drivers of the past were now giving way to the younger generation. Of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg. But without any further hesitation, let's take a look at the different liveries seen throughout season 1994. Whilst it most certainly pains me to do this, coming in at number 15 is MINARDT with this orange, blue and white ensemble. Now, whilst the colour combination itself really isn't all too bad, it just doesn't look very much like a MINARDT Formula 1 car, and is the first of the team's cars to break away from their traditional colour scheme. This new look for the team came about thanks to a merger between MINARDT and Giuseppe Lucchini's SCUDERIA Italia. As such, Lucchini branding was seen on the 1994 car, along with new sponsors Beta Tools, which established a large presence of orange on the car. However, it's unclear why the team introduced blue to its livery, as SCUDERIA Italia was an Italian team which always raced in red. Furthermore, the colour scheme and patterns seen on the car often changed from race to race, which kind of gives the impression that not even the team itself was sure what to make of its livery. Special mention must go to the team for responding to Eddie Jordan's Ireland 1, Italy 0 jab during World Cup 94, with a message of their own, Italia in, Ireland out. However, with a livery that defies tradition, but not so much in a good way, MINARDT occupy the lowest rank. For the majority of the time, Tyrrell liveries are rather plain, and when they're not plain, they're absolutely bonkers. 1994 just so happens to be a year in which Tyrrell opted for a minimalist livery that wouldn't interfere with any potential new sponsors. Sadly, the state of Tyrrell's livery was indicative of the team's financial worries. Usually in such circumstances, the team would run with its trusted blue livery, but on this occasion Tyrrell is seen here in white, with Katayama's Mild 7 sponsorship being the only significant break in colour. As the season progressed, the team would garner a few more sponsors, but the absence of any sort of design element really makes for an uninteresting livery in this case. And so, for a livery that could have been made to look much better simply if it was painted blue, which mind you is what the team happened to do the following year, Tyrrell's 1994 car occupies the number 14 spot. For those of you who might have been wondering why I've been doing a top 15, despite the fact that there was only 14 competing teams in 1994, well, the reason for that is LARROUSSE, which competed during the year with two separate sponsor packages, and so I thought I'd rank them separately. Coming in at number 13 is the green livery used by the team to promote non-alcoholic beer, TOURTEL. Now, whilst I give LARROUSSE all the credit in the world for thinking laterally when it came to its livery concept, this just so happens to be the livery I like least out of the two. I feel this livery, whilst using a rather smart choice of vibrant colours, does nothing to really distinguish LARROUSSE from the rest of the teams on the grid, especially when teams with a higher profile, such as BENETTON and LOTUS, happen to be running with similar colours. Overall, this livery, in my eyes, is the least memorable used by the team, and so takes up the number 13 position. At number 12 we have Debutante's Pacific. This one I'm sure is bound to divide opinions purely because of how unbelievably 90s this car is, and whilst that may be true, I can't really say that pink and baby blue make much of a colour combination. The team has also coupled this with a dull silver backdrop, and whilst that may have worked for teams such as Mercedes or McLaren, in this case it just makes the team look underfunded, which is just what Pacific happened to be. The lack of sponsorship, whilst always a refreshing sight, almost never shines a positive light on a team's financial position. However, when the team eventually signed vodka brand Ursus as sponsors, it actually, in my opinion, slightly hurt the livery. Whilst I feel the livery could be improved with the different use of colours, it certainly gets some points for carrying on with the multicoloured swooshes that were seen on Pacific cars during their time in F3000. For a noteworthy and original, yet slightly campy livery, Pacific slots in at number 12. Coming in at number 11 is this radical and colourful SASOL Jordan livery. I haven't always been a fan of the Jordan liveries from this time frame. However, I consider this 1994 version of the livery to be an improvement over the team's 92 and 93 cars. The 94 car received a major injection of colour and presented its colour palette in a more balanced and pleasing manner. Importantly, this livery also featured something that was missing over the past few years: traditional Irish green, if only just a splash of it. Perhaps it was just the amount to stir up enough patriotism for the team to poke a little bit of fun at their Italian rivals, as mentioned earlier in the video. Overall, the livery is a little bit garish, with its colours tending to somewhat clash. It's the sort of livery that if you see it from a distance, you're not quite sure if you're looking at a Jordan car or not. And so with the typically multifaceted livery, Jordan take out the number 11 spot. At number 10 we have the other livery used by LARROUSSE in 94. Some people might consider this livery to be a bit over the top, but for me this is a livery that really pops. The colour combination is sleek and on point, and KRONENBOURG's company image gets used on the car in a very creative way. The red and white checkered look, coming together with touches of dark green, makes for an energetic, standout, almost harlequin look. For a livery that had the potential to look comically overdone, it actually comes together quite well in the end, and it was a shame that it was only seen during 3 rounds of the season. I have a feeling that this is a love it or hate it type of livery, and whilst I'm not sure if I love it, I by no means hate it. For a livery which, if anything, turned LARROUSSE into a talking point during what was otherwise a low-profile final season for the team, LARROUSSE's Kronenbourg livery takes up the number 10 spot. Whilst I may have thrown some criticisms towards Pacific earlier on for its overly 90s looking livery, the very same could be said about the 1994 Footwork Arrows, which came with a livery that almost looked like a jigsaw puzzle. Nevertheless, this is a 90s F1 look that I am much more interested in, and is a livery that boasts a lot to meet the eye. The only real problem I have with it is the blotches of green and fluoro yellow, which tend to stick out to a greater extent than necessary. The car would have looked much better, and it did the following season, had it stuck to just red, white and blue. Having said that, I still have a place in my heart for this prototypical version of the mid-90s Footwork Arrows livery, enough at least to give it the number 9 ranking. It's genuinely hard for me to rank a Sauber from this period in at number 8, but the reason for this is I feel the team's 1994 livery came with a few too many new influences which ultimately diminished the overall look of the car, at least in comparison to the team's outstanding 1993 livery. For one, the addition of red, white and grey polka dots to the side of the vehicle gave the car an unnecessarily busy look, which detracted from its sleek black scenery, and whilst it was certainly a clever idea, making it seem as though the car itself was wearing a gold Tissot watch looks a tad silly in my opinion. The team's livery during this season was certainly one that caught your eye, as a good team livery should do, and did a great job at separating Sauber from the pack, whilst embracing the team's Swiss racing heritage. I am always a sucker for traditional liveries, and despite the fact that Ligier had by now been using basically the same livery for 3 years running, it's hard for me to rank this car any lower than 7th. In my mind, this is what a Ligier car looks like in its purest form. With a classic shade of blue and its GITANES sponsorship, the car's livery holds many parallels with the original Ligier liveries of the late 1970s. Upon close inspection, the car comes with a red tip on its nose cone. Perhaps that's where McLaren got the idea from. Either way, it's hard to deny that Ligier had some of the most visually appealing cars of this time frame. However, due to a lack of innovation in recent seasons, Ligier finds itself in 7th spot, despite having a livery that wasn't broken and didn't need to be fixed. Despite the fact that it had by now been seen in some form or another for a good part of 2 decades, the classic Marlboro McLaren livery is still more pleasing to the eye than a great number of teams on this list, and solid enough to hold down the number 6 spot. It's hard for me to take points away from a near perfect and widely recognised livery design. McLaren continue to stick with a model that works, with the only real detractor being the absence of Honda. McLaren during this time was in somewhat of an engine supplier limbo, and sadly, McLaren Peugeot never quite had the same ring to it as McLaren Honda or McLaren Mercedes for that matter. Aside from that, the livery contains each of the hallmarks which made the Marlboro McLaren team liveries an integral part of Formula 1 iconography. Even so, the fact of the matter is that there have been slightly superior versions of this livery seen in seasons previous to 1994. And so it's these small factors which have determined McLaren's 6th place on the grid. Most people would say this car doesn't actually have a livery, but technically speaking it has a red livery, which pays homage to the national racing colour of Italy. What it isn't is a sponsor's livery. Although Ferrari have by all means made the colour red their own, which, let's face it, is absolutely iconic, this most certainly isn't going to turn into a series where I put Ferrari near the top of the pile every time, because some Ferrari liveries have looked a lot better than others. In this case, we have an absolute banger. Almost everything about this Ferrari is not only gorgeous to behold, but is everything that made the Ferrari cars of this time look great in spades. The deep scarlet texture, Marlboro sponsorship, the touches of yellow and black, courtesy of Adjip Fuels. This is, simply put, one of the better looking liveries produced by the team, and in spite of the fact the results might not have been what the Tifosi were hoping for back then, this distinctively Ferrari makes it to number 5. Coming in at number 4 is Team Lotus, competing in its final season. I have a lot of time for the cars produced by Lotus during their final few seasons, and although their livery from 1994 might not be as famous as the classic Gold Leaf, JPS or Camel Lotus liveries, there's certainly a lot to appreciate about the team's return to the green and gold colour scheme during the 90s. Even though sponsorship is the lifeblood for struggling Formula 1 teams, Lotus's 1994 livery suffered from somewhat of an overabundance of sponsorship, which tended to clutter up an otherwise fine livery. The team would also tinker with its livery during the season, eventually adding a grey Team Lotus silhouette upon the rear of the bodywork, which refined the livery to a considerable extent. For inventing a livery which combined British racing tradition with the modern look of a 1994 Formula 1 car, Lotus line up in a respectable 4th spot. In at number 3 we have the first of the Rothmans Williams cars. This is a livery which I imagine would have taken people at the time by surprise, as it certainly had a hard act to follow in the Canon Williams cars of the past few seasons. Thankfully, in this case, the Rothmans company colour scheme lends itself perfectly to Williams, much like it had previously with the Ram March Formula 1 team, as well as Porsche, Ford and Subaru in the World Rally Championship. There's very little you can get wrong with a widely famous livery such as this, and Williams have managed to bring Rothmans colours to life with a livery that employs base colours of navy blue and white, accented with red and gold stripes. Even though I feel the Rothmans Williams liveries would become even more appealing as the seasons went on, this 1994 version of the livery is captivating enough to harness 3rd position in this countdown. SIMTEK, one of the most interesting teams to spring up during the 1990s. This was the team which brought, for the first time, sponsorship from MTV. However, it's not so much the team's sponsors which attracts me to this livery, but more so the unique colour scheme utilised by the team. The car's deep shades of purple create a lustrous and dynamic presence on track, tied together with subtle changes in colour that accentuate the car's bodywork, which, when it comes to the SIMTEK S941 chassis, is a very good thing indeed. To top it all off, we have an unusual shade of teal added to the car, courtesy of MTV, which in all honesty shouldn't work 9 times out of 10, but in the case of SIMTEK it just somehow works. This original variant of the team's livery is, in my opinion, the better of SIMTEK's liveries, and sees SIMTEK attain a healthy 2nd place. And finally, to cap everything off, we have Benetton in 1st position with the very first of the team's mild 7 liveries. It's no secret that Benetton were famous for not only being Schumacher's team during the mid-90s, but also routinely producing liveries that bent the creative envelope and embraced the colourful nature of the Benetton clothing brand. In 1994 the team departed from its Camel team livery to a livery that met the sky blue and white of mild 7 with traditional Benetton green. Add to this the clever use of navy blue, thanks to engine suppliers Ford, and small touches of red to the front of the car, and we have one of the most visually engaging team liveries of the entire decade. The team also revived its brushwork motif during the season, with 4 multicoloured brushstrokes seen at the rear of the vehicle. The number 1 spot goes to Benetton for managing to combine a spectacular array of colours and sponsors to form a livery which has a wonderfully festive feel to it. Yet another championship goes to Benetton, although, for me at least, there can be no questions this time surrounding the legality of the team's triumph. And so there it is. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Keep in mind that these are my own personal opinions. but I am interested to hear what all of you happen to think which team had the greatest looking livery in 1994. Feel free to share your own rankings in the comments section, and let me know if you would like to see more ranking videos in the future. And so, F1 fans, I bid you farewell.